Israel doesn't want to control the Gaza. I think we made a mistake. And now everybody understands in Israel that we made a huge mistake. We thought that, maybe Hamas can be domesticated. Thankfully, today there is an American administration that is not only talking the talk, but also walking the walk. The idea of temporarily relocating people is in order to do the construction. That's it. And so if countries are going to object that, we are going to find countries that are willing to cooperate with that. We have gaps with the Americans, as we did during the Biden administration. There were, junctures in which we were seeing things differently. I think that those junctures have actually prolonged the war. This administration now, I think, is more in sync with us. And that's why I'm more optimistic that we can do things faster.
Okay, how close is Iran to its nuclear program?
I think that the people that follow this can tell you that they have accumulated enough fissile material in order to build about 5 bombs. The question is whether they can assemble this fissile material into a weaponization program, into a nuclear weapon. Israel, if we reach the conclusion that the Iranians are actually building a nuclear weapon, we will take action. Now, we happen to be in a situation in which there is an American administration that thinks the same.
Hi, you're watching The Times of India. I'm Aditi Prasad, and with me is Reuven Azar. He is the Israeli ambassador to India. He's been with in Delhi for the last 6 months. He joined us in August 2024, and that was the time when Israel was completing, I think, 1 year of the conflict in the almost a year. It's been 1.5 years of the Gaza war. When it all started, the Prime Minister Netanyahu he gave a ploy of eliminating Hamas. How close are you to that goal?
Well, we are getting closer. Let's look at what happened. What happened was that not only Hamas launched this atrocious attack to so many civilians, the highest manners did they seize per pauper, but also there was a regional war that waged on us. We were attacked in the north at Hezbollah. We were attacked by militias of the Iranian proxies in Iraq. We were attacked directly by Iran. We were being attacked by the Houthis in Yemen. There were attempts also to create similar violence in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. So this was a multi-front attack. What Iran tried to do is to ignite a ring of fire around us. Now let's see what happened. First of all, we have decimated the capability of Hezbollah in the north. We had a new government in Lebanon. Hopefully that we take Lebanon to a much brighter path. You have a change in Syria as a result of the fact that Hezbollah was decimated. And maybe there will be a hope in Syria, although there is a jihadist regime. I don't know what could happen. But at least the Iranians are not there anymore. You had Iran back in the box because you retaliated in a way that made the Iranians stop their attacks. So if you take into account also the military capabilities of Hamas, thousands of rockets firing at Israel, their infrastructure underground, their factories of missiles, all that has been destroyed. So what are we left? We're left with a situation in which we managed to bring back 195 hostages thanks to the pressure, the military pressure that we put. And we are now putting more pressure to bring the rest of those. We still have 59. About 25 of them are still alive. We are hoping to get them back. So it's a combination of military pressure and negotiation to achieve 2 goals that the government has stated at the outset. And to bring back the hostages and to make sure that Hamas no longer can pose a threat like the 7th of October again on Israel. It means that Hamas has to leave. Hamas has to renounce power. But they are holding to power while basically sequestrating the international assistance that Palestinian people receive and selling it to the population and terrorizing the population. So we have to continue a campaign until we get to the point in which we get our people back and that Hamas no longer poses the threat.
That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is why, despite the military operation, the new commander of Hezbollah is just hearing him a couple of days ago. Mr. Naim Kiri was continuing on about, we're going to give it back and you're going to come back to point of force. But the fact remains that 1.5 years down the line, the threats are far from eliminated. And Hamas, as you yourself pointed out, is not weak to lead the Gaza Strip.
Well, you are right to a certain point because the radical forces in the region are not going to just one day disappear. But what clearly had is that the balance of power in a region is changed as a result of the actions of our defense forces. So yes, in every threat that you have, including in your area of the world, you have the malign intentions of people that are having a radical ideology, and then you have the means. Okay, so I haven't said that the malign intentions of the radicals have changed. I think what has changed is the capability to purpose. So that is clearly changed, and this gives us the hope that we will be able, and actually we are getting back to our lives. When you look at what's happening in the Israeli economy, for example, our economy didn't even shrink during this war. It continued to grow, and now it's growing between 4 and 7%. Israelis have gone back to their lives. Yes, we have still this very painful issue with the hostages and their families, and they have to do whatever we can in order to bring them home. But these enemies that they launched this unprovoked attack against us, the year and a half ago, are no longer capable of hurting the day-to-day life with Israel. And they're going back with full force. The Israelis are very energized. They had to give a lot this year. Imagine, we have a reservist army, 300,000 people have been recruited. They had to be their jobs, their families. So as we gradually go back to our lives, the situation in Israel is getting much better. People are going abroad. People are developing their businesses. There was even, I don't know if you heard, but there was one of the 10 largest tech deals in the history of technology happened in Israel only a couple of weeks ago when Google decided to buy Wix for $32 billion. In addition to that, we have in confidence of foreign companies also in the energy sector. It saw recently that SOCAR and British Petroleum are investing in offshore gas in Israel. So the economic mood in Israel has changed. And that gives us hope that we'll be able to get back to our lives once we finish the job into that.
How long are you giving it to finish the job, quote unquote?
Well, we have to be patient because this is not easy dilemma. We could have at day one surrender to Hamas, maybe bring back some of the hostages, but we would have bought time for limited period. If we want to re-achieve security, we have to understand that we're dealing with an organization that is willing to do whatever it takes, doesn't have mercy not only on Israeli, doesn't have mercy on their own population. I don't know if you saw the demonstrations in the last week against Hamas in the West Street. Yes. Now, imagine how courageous you have to be to demonstrate against such vile people that do not hesitate. And actually, they did it. They killed and tortured people that they captured who were demonstrating against them. So the fact that Palestinians are daring to demonstrate, it just shows you how frustrated they are. Not only us, from the fact that you have Hamas there on the ground. So, look, Israel doesn't want to control the Gaza. And I think that Hamas understood that even before it said. That's why we took advantage of the fact of taking this territory hostage to indoctrinate for violence, to sequestrate everything that has been given to the Palestinians in order to, instead that for total war, an internal war at stake there. We had a mission, I think, Israelis and Pakistanis, to get rid of this barrier. And we've been willing to lead for too long this kind of regime beside us. And I think we made a mistake. And now everybody understands in Israel that we made a huge mistake. Sometimes when you don't want to confront DNA, you don't want to confront reality because you like peace. You don't want to enter into war. You want to postpone the war. At the end of the day, you pay the price. And this is what happened to us. We thought that, maybe Hamas can be domesticated. They are responsible for 2 million people in the Gaza Strip. They were in control of the Gaza Strip. So maybe with economic incentives, we can make them, put aside a little bit the jihad and concentrate in the well-being of the Palestinian population. That's what decent people would do anywhere in the world, right? No, unfortunately, we were wrong.
Do you think Iran is the bigger threat? And what is the Israeli government's endgame with Iran? I mean, the endgame with Hamas is, of course, eliminate Hamas. But then there are many other in this ring of fire, and each backed by Iran. So what's the plan for Iran?
Well, we've been working consistent to prepare ourselves against the Iranian threat because we took seriously the statements of the Ayatollah regime when they are saying time and again that they want to destroy us, but they don't see any legitimacy in our existence, etc., etc. So, ironically, we were much well prepared for the Iranian attack, Hezbollah attack, then we were prepared for Hamas. And that gave us two results. First is that we've been able to postpone the aspirations of Iran to try a nuclear weapon because we are not going to agree for such a situation. So we keep investing billions of dollars, getting intelligence and getting this program out of realization. Okay. Number two, we knew that there was a huge ballistic missile and other kind of area of threats that are being prepared against. So we invested for years in multi-layered system of missile defense. So look, we are not going to be able to solve the entire program of radicalism in the world or in the Middle East. What we have to be attentive is on the direct threats in order to be able to defend ourselves when they are attacked, and in order to try to deter our enemies. Because at the end of the day, democracies thrive in times of peace, unlike dictatorship. Okay? So, as a democracy, you want to have a situation that you have the longer times of peace possible to make peace with your neighbors when they are ready. And we did many peace agreements with Egyptians, with Jordanians, the Abraham Accords. We attempted many times to solve the conflict with Palestinians, but there are those radicals that they are not ready to. So you have to, learn how to cope with that. We are hoping to get the international backing that is needed in order to, get the Iranians to change policy. And thankfully, today there is an American administration that is not only talking the talk, but also walking the walk. We are seeing how hard they are now hitting the movements that are disturbing international trade and how they've been threatening the Iranian regime. But if they don't start this backing, it's been very class. So I think that when democracies show dissolve, there is a chance for stability to reign for the longer period of time.
You talked about Iran's nuclear program and of course Trump has been trying to stop it and writing letters and whatnot and threatening to bomb Iran even if they don't agree to that. But the Iranian regime seems pretty set that they're not going to. How do you think this is going to play out?
It's a good question. It's we had a saying in Israel that the prophecy was since the end of the time, the prophets prophecy was only given to four. So I don't want to give it four. I don't know what they had. I think that we had a pretty serious situation there because the Iranians don't want to change course when you look at their conduct throughout the last 2 decades, we saw that when they had an imminent threat on their regime, they tend to be more prudent. So sometimes there is a difference between the level of rhetoric and what they are doing on the ground. Okay, I think that as much as we show resolve and that regime feels that its future is impaired, then the chances that we would get a more moderate conduct is much higher. So we had to see how it's going to play out. When you close up to the radicals, do we always see it as a sign of weakness and they become more involved?
The killing of all these, the top echelons of Hezbollah, Hamas, Hania, over the last several months, how much of that has contributed to the optimism that we see right now on Israel?
Look, it's very important because there are people, like us that we have to defend ourselves and we have to defend our policy, but there are many quiet players that have been watching very closely, and they know that Israel has removed the huge threat. Remember what happened back a few years back when the Iranians attacked the Aramco facilities in Saudi Arabia and destroyed half the industry of Saudi Arabia in 2 nights. Imagine how countries that do not have the missile defense systems that Israel had feel about the level of threat coming from a country like Iran. So this removal of the leadership of the Iranian proxies has caused a great amount of hope among many in the Middle East that maybe we can move on to an era that is more stable, that is more, has the level of threats reduced. Look how people in Lebanon are rejoicing that suddenly they have a pope. Maybe they can attract tourists to Lebanon again. Maybe Lebanon will be free from this grip, this iron grip that Hezbollah was holding everything in Lebanon. Suddenly you have, Arab Gulf countries looking at Lebanon again, maybe investing in Lebanon. So this gives hope to the region, and I'm really hopeful that when they stabilize the situation, finally Hamas renounces power. There is the huge call in the Arab world for Hamas to renounce power. It's not coming just from us. In Palestinian constituency, you have this call. In the Arab world, we have this call. So if we achieve that situation, then I think the prospects, the dramatic prospects, the economic prospects for the region is skyrocket.
You talked about the Arab world giving this point, and obviously not saying it out loud. We've not heard anything coming out from the Arab world. In fact, for the most part, they've seen the Arab world quietly helping Israel, but on the pace of it, talking, about protecting the Palestinians. Because you said lasting peace. If there's a lasting peace to happen, there is a lot of bloodshed that's already happened over the last 1.5 years, and the narrative, unfortunately, has really been won by the Palestinian people here, because most of the world, when they talk about it, when people talk about the Gaza war, they talk about the deaths and civilians in Gaza, Israel bombing Gaza Strip. That's what people talk about. Has Israel lost the narrative war somewhere?
Because there's no doubt that we are outnumbered. Okay, they had, first of all, Israel is the one and only Jewish state, 10 million people in an ocean of Arab and Muslim population. Okay, just to give the numbers, the Arab world was more than 350 million. The Muslim world are not billion. Okay, so you have means of communication like Al Jazeera, TRT, and other means of communication that are invested huge amount of energy to pump the Hamas narrative. Okay, Israel has been investing mainly on hard power. They are now trying to see how we can invest more in soft power, something that's more difficult for us to do We have to prioritize. At the end of the day, we have to, protect our lives before we get onto something bar. Yeah, but we're doing it. For minister to enter the public, the government has brought with him a promise to invest a little bit more in that. At the end of the day, it's going to be a drop in the ocean compared to what the other side has that. So yes, they are challenged with that. At the end of the day, we have to do what is right for us. It's better to be alive and not loved than to be dead and loved. We tried that in the past, Didn't E-Day. Not very long time. A third of our people were killed in the Holocaust. We had a lot of sympathy, but it didn't say after your teeth. Okay? Sometimes you have to be tough. You have to stand for yourself, stand for the family, to stand for your people, to stand for your nation. It has a cost, and people will do propaganda manipulations of it. You know what the tactics are. You know this very well because you know how terrorists operate, because we've been threatened by terrorists. So they are going to, first of all, attack you in a merciless way. They're going to breach any code in the book, any code of warfare, any code of humanity. They're going to use hospitals and ambulances and schools to attack you. And then when you retaliate, they will say, oh, our schools are being attacked. But this is a cynical game. And not only that this game was exposed, but even the Hamas leaders have been saying, we need these civilians to die in order to prove the cause of PR, in order to serve the cause, and we are ready to spend $1 million. Okay, so they are hiding behind civilians. Only yesterday, I saw was really painful to see a board coming down from an ambulance and guts saying, we were bombarded because mass people were hiding among us. So we know what the facts are. Now, at the end of the day, I think people will realize that. And if though there are a lot of demonstrations, maybe by radicals, to see it around Europe, you see sometimes in the United States, but the silent majority of those countries now understand much better what is the nature of the threat that is radical, is the zealots, because they are working now in their streets as well. And they know that as much as they be demonstrated against us, they would be demonstrated against others. They will be using the same methods. Therefore, it is very important not only for Israel, but for the rest of the democratic world, that the radicals are defeated and they are not allowed to manipulate our civilization in order to reach their goal, because they are using our strengths against us.
So basically what you're saying is that the deaths of so many civilians, which the entire world has been kind words about, returning the Iraq, is somehow justified in all of this?
Well, any loss of life is unjustified. Okay? In our civilization, every single soul is like the entire universe. Okay? But please, don't talk to me about the UN. The UN, and you know this very well, because India was also being mistreated in the UN. You have a bunch of dictatorships ganging up against you and distorting the entire system against you. And this is destroying the UN. The UN was established in 1945 after the lessons that were drawn for Second World War to create a better world. And what has happened? You had a corrupt system that it actually coming from within, that appoints people that had distorted agendas, which dictatorships use their numbers in the UN in order to adopt resolutions that are completely biased, in order to corrupt institutions that were built in order to build a better world. So as they manage to sequestrate more and more UN institutions to their agenda, they are destroying the UN. And this is how we got to this situation, for example, with an organization called Unheard. an organization that was established in 1948 to deal with the Palestinian refugees, but not with the intention to help them settle, but with the intention to perpetuate their status in order to perpetuate the conflict of Israel, in order to make Israel legitimate, in order to destroy the state of Israel. So imagine, DT, that so-called refugees that left the war zone in 1948 are receiving until today, 4 generations after, food ration. Imagine that here in Delhi, you would have people that left areas of Pakistan in 1948 and would still be receiving food by UN agencies. Can you imagine that? It's completely ridiculous. So it is very easy to say, oh, look at what's happening to the Pakistanis. But there are consequences for actions. When you refuse to very powerful and generous submissions that are put on the table, like we did into the 80,000, the David summit with our part, and then in the year 2008, you refuse to be. Then you sequestrate everything you get in order to launch a war against Israel. There's a price to pay for that. You cannot be unaccountable, on the one hand, to attack Israel so ferociously and to commit war crimes in such degree, and then to expect that Israel will not retaliate in a situation that you are hiding behind civilians. It's not going to happen. They are not going to have their way. By the way, all these figures also were manipulated. We've seen only a week ago that the so-called Palestinian Hamas Ministry of Health published the numbers of people that die. You could see easily there, but by analyzing that, first of all, there's a huge difference between males and females. The difference was about 16,000 in the fighting, around 15 and 55. Then the people are analyzing more, and they found out that about 3,000 names are, appearing twice. Then we know that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad had been killing their own people in the misfires they have, right? And they included in these numbers also the people that died from natural causes in the area. So at the end of the day, when you analyze the numbers, you see that the ratio between terrorists and its civilians is about 1-to-1, which is very tragic, but it's much better compared to any other urban conflict in the world. Okay, so actually Israel has been performing outstandingly when it comes to civilian life. They are doing, efforts that no army did in the past. You have invented new methods to keep people out of harm's way. At the time, the Hamas were doing their utmost to keep people in harm's way. So you're right. The propaganda machine against us was successful, but it doesn't change the facts.
What is the end game now in Gaza? Because there was a ceasefire, there was a 2-month lull, and again the fighting is intensified. Israel has just, I think yesterday, told Palestinians in Rafah, that is South Gaza, to evacuate. Looks like another ground invasion is coming up. What's the end game? How does this end? Does Israel endorse President Trump's Gaza relocation plan?
Well, first of all, it ends when the hostages are back. It can happen today if Hamas decides to renounce power and get back their hostage. And it happens when you see a responsible Palestinian player assuming power, it does. Now,
Who is that player going to be?
well, there are many alternatives. The only
Instance?
the local candidates, local tribes. We say those would be demonstrating this. We know that there are tribes and families that are willing to pay over. Hamas is just impeding them from them to do so. So we would have to put more military pressure. Nobody's going to really invest in the Gaza Strip in the construction or the location if Hamas is there. Okay, so I think it's a common hinge.
What if the Palestinians who live there don't want to look the Gaza Strip? For them, that's the only, they don't.
It's not the only I think that what the American administration will say is that we have to sit outside of it. You have many wars, unfortunately, that have been going on in the region, outside the region. In Syria, you had 12 million people that were relocated. Some of them, about 6 million outside the country, 6 million inside the country. In the Ukraine war, you had about 5 million people at best. Only Gaza should be the place in which people are not allowed to be. So, according to a Gallup poll, about half of the people in the Gaza Strip want to leave. The question is, we are not going to go do exports. Of course, so. Is there countries that are willing to accept them with temporary until, there's a construction network there and then they come back? That's okay. But we have to stop thinking in terms we thought in the cash. That, it's impossible to fight Hamas. You have to with the fact that the terrorist organizations don't read the life of Palestinians. No, that game is over. And they have to introduce new ideas. Okay. So if there are countries that are willing to cooperate this, the President Trump, we are, then we can try and do it.
So the Israeli government is in agreement with the plan.
We are in full sync with the American policy. Now, how the American policy is going to be executed, that's another question.
Have you heard from your Arab allies, or America's Arab allies? Have you heard from them that they are in agreement with this plan? Because on the face of it, they said,
people think that people are seeking the altars. Okay, it's not that Israel is not interested to ethnically downstream. Okay, we never were in this game, and you saw that in the conflicts we had in the past, the Palestinian population only grew under Israeli rule. We never had a policy of getting rid of people or sending people away, and the idea of temporarily relocating people is in order to do the construction. That's it. And so if countries are going to object that, we are going to find countries that are willing to cooperate with that. And if we fail, then the Palestinians will have to live in very harsh conditions while the construction is being done. Okay? So who is going to pay the price of the failure of an American policy? The Palestinians are going to. So, okay? So I think people have to look at it or consider it. And it comes to our Arab neighbors, I think that we share a common interest not to see a continuation of Hamas ruling Gross. So it was very clear, even in the Arab League resolution, to see, if you read between the lines, to see very clear that they don't want Hamas to stay. Okay? So the question is how we are going to achieve. As much as we have cooperation, either direct cooperation on the table or under the table, then there is a chance that by still suffering with the meat. We have to be realistic about the situation. We have to find solutions. We have to promote a more moderate action. And we can do this together.
There was Biden's way of doing things. There's Trump's way of doing things. What has been more beneficial to the Israeli force?
But I think that we've been working with any other administration. You had been working with Democratic administrations, Republican administrations. Sometimes we have gaps with the Americans, as we did during the Biden administration. The Biden administration has been supporting us already. We are very grateful for what they did for us. But there were, junctures in which we were seeing things different. I think that those junctures have actually prolonged the war. Because if you remember, the Biden administration was against us entering into Rafah. Yes. Eventually, we entered into Rafah, and the human cost wasn't very high. Okay. They were holding some of the assistance that they are waiting for. This administration now, I think, is more in sync with us. That's why I'm more optimistic that we can do things faster. And our enemies see that there are gaps on the other side. They will draw the conclusions and try, make it prolong their. But if they see that we are more coordinated and we show more resolve, I think it had the potential of shortening.
Do you see an Iran-US war on the horizon? Because you certainly are looking at the kind of noises coming out of Washington, D.C., as well as out of Iran.
Well, pointing to it. As I said, I don't know. I think that for the American administration, and this is what we encourage for them, they would like to have a diplomatic solution. But they want to see something that we haven't seen in the past. is the complete removal of the Iranian nuclear program, because it is evident in the way that Iranians have been cheating the international regimes, the NPT, international community, how they were clandestinely developing a military nuclear program, that they cannot be trusted.
Okay. How close is Iran to its nuclear program? I'm asking you this as I'm sure you remember.
Well, I think that the people that follow this can tell you that they have accumulated enough fissile material to build about 5 bombs. The question is whether they can assemble this fissile material into a weaponization program, into a nuclear weapon. There are different estimations around that, but there is something that people don't hardly doubt, that is that they had the knowledge to do that. So that's why we're investing so much in intelligence, in trying to understand what is the stage in which they're at. And regardless of America, Israel, if we reach the conclusion that the Iranians are actually building a nuclear weapon, we will take action. Now, we happen to be in a situation in which there is an American administration that thinks the same. So I hope, and I think we have some basis to believe that when the Iranians see that sense of resolve, they will be more prudent when it comes to what they decide. If they cease to be prudent, if they decide to challenge the American position, then the chances of conflict, of course, would go up. But again, I'm not in a position to.
You just said everything and then said you're not in a position to debate it. But okay, let's just move away from Gaza, because as I think we just talked about every angle except for one eye, and that is inside Israel. Inside Israel, the rising, or at least what we perceive from the outside to be a rising anger against Netanyahu for not being able to resolve this conflict sooner, for the deaths of many hostages.
Yeah, well, there is a larger context. You're right that this debate is more non-infer, but there's a larger context. The first context is that, of course, people are angry at not only at the government, at the entire system, who was supposed to defend them and failed us on the 7th of October. So first of all, there is general a lot of anger against the system, against the establishment. Okay, that's number one. Second, what happened in Israel as a result of this ferocious attack is an amazing level of solidarity. People coming out, not only being recruited to the army, recruiting themselves to multitude of civilian voluntary activities to support the families in the front, support soldiers, to support each other materially, physically. We had, imagine, we had about 200,000 Israelis coming back from abroad to defend Israel after the 7th of October. So this is an amazing phenomenon. Another phenomenon is very, very strong, is the resolve that the Israeli society has to sort out this, to get rid of Hamas. Okay, and that's why, although the government is in a very difficult dilemma when it comes to getting rid of Hamas as opposed to setting the hostages, people understand that this dilemma is not easily solved. So, of course, the families are demonstrating, rightfully so, they had the right to do that. Any constituency in Israel has the right to protest. And they know how to protest, and they are protesting. At the end of the day, we have a democratically elected government. They have the responsibility to execute the policy, to bring for results. The public is rightfully demanding that from them to get the result. So some of them can do this by supporting the government because they think that they are doing the right thing. Some of them will demonstrate against the government because they think that they are not doing the right thing.
So you think that's just part and parcel of democracy, the protests that they see every evening on Israeli televisions?
Of course, it's part of democracy. And people are frustrated because, look,
what's the sentiment? So the popularity sentiment of Netanyahu within Israel 1.5 years into the war.
look, as an observer, I'm a citizen under as interpreter government. I can observe anybody like that. So at the beginning, as I told you, after the 7th of October, it was this sense of failure, of anger, and demand from the government to solve the situation. Now I think we are in a situation in which people have recognized that the government, together with the defense forces, have achieved significant achievements against the enemies that were trying to hurt us. And they are impatient to see a resolution of this, to see the end of it, because there is suffering, because people have to be going into the army, because the families, the territory continues to suffer, because we had hostages there suffering. But this is the kind of pressure that the government has to do. Okay? And eventually, if the government fails any nation, we'll have elections and it will be replaced by another government. And the next government that comes will have the same kind of pressures from the public. Okay, this is very natural.
Okay, let's move on to the other part of this podcast, which is about bilateral ties with India.
I think that both the approach of Israel and the approach of India have been very mature. The fact that India entered into negotiation in the content in this place, we're basically the biggest power entering into engagement with Trump administration. That bears a lot of importance, and I think will bear a lot of consequences, positive consequences for the future of the United States and India. And Israel is a visible part of it, because we are democracies. Both America and India are entangled with Israel in a very deep way when it comes to cooperation in security, in defense industries, in technology, and we can create the greatest partnerships in Earth. So although we are very small, we export innovation, we can do great things together. I'm very hopeful that this relationship, and I've been seeing back and forth between I think that Mr. Goyal went only 3 times. So this has a great potential for the great power competition. It has potential for securing fastest to go of India to the world stage. You guys are now going to be 2 years from now the third biggest world economy. And for Israel, it's very comforting to see. We see, first of all, in the 7th of October, a very, very powerful statement, and Prime Minister Modi supporting our right for separateness. And we've been seeing Askadai for a year and a half that things within India is continuing, that we can trust the Indian chain of supply. That's steady pull for us. And it's a pull mutually as well. The fact that we can support each other in fact of penny. It is good for the relationship and deepens the trust that we already have between Israel and Yemen.
In terms of bilateral ties, however, what are the 3 areas that you see have in the biggest potentials in the next?
Well, I'll give you 4. So we already had an amazing cooperation in defense and defense industries. This has grown. And we, are probably the first country to completely adapt to the making new airports that we are already producing here together with in joint ventures with big companies here. Drones, we are now entering into autonomous PDS vehicles. They are entering into the automatic autonomous helicopters, you name it. We are having here investments on factories that include the radar systems that are provided to Indian defense forces. It's huge, and we are now going from that also to R&D. Yes, we had a joint program to DRDO and MAFAD, which is the agency, part agency in Israel, to promote startups. A program in Hyderabad with the 10 startups that are working there, try to see the other partners. So this is it's amazing. A second partnership we have is on agriculture. The fact that this company in India, Jain, they bought one of the 3 main irrigation companies in the world, Oman. They bought it, they incorporated in the Indian market. The Indian government invested millions in creating these centers of excellence that are providing subsidized seedlings to the farmers, increasing their crops. This all this being done with Israeli technology, with some Israeli consultancy as well, had a great impact. Everybody knows it. It's very strong. We're going to continue strong. The fact that India today is so capable, so if it enjoys the food security that it deserves, thanks to their foreign, it's a great thing. And we are proud. We're proud. The main credit goes to India. The investment was Indian. The effort is India. We are just, as I told you, the fact that they have some innovation can benefit the entire chain of the India. Okay. We are moving from that also to water, because water is becoming one of the main challenges of the fact that this country is the biggest construction site in the world today means that you are using and sometimes have used the water resource. Sure. And this will require treatment, sir. We have gone with the treatment. I think that as India becomes richer, we have more resources to deal with treatment of water. And guess what? Israel is the number one in the world with water technology. So we already have companies working here. We are working on creating 2 centers of excellence on water. And the idea is to bring down the price of the treatment. So, people can enjoy recycled water. In Israel, we are recycling 95% of the water, and we are irrigating 70% of our bogs with recycled water because we don't have enough ample water. There is an Israeli company, ID, that is already desalinating 1 billion cubic meters of water in minute. Half of it doing it for Reliance in the refineries, some of it in the nuclear reactors, some of it in Chennai, probably Maharashtra. So this is a great partnership that is building also on the water side.
It was one thing that you would ask the Indian government to do to help resolve the conflicts in the Middle East.
Sooner, faster, water. Well, I think that the Kenyan government is doing the right part. They are offering a huge opportunity to our region because one of the results of the rise in the Indian economy, the manufacturing, is that you will be moving trillions of dollars of merchandise from east to west, from the India to Europe to the Middle East to America. And that means that we have to create the connectivity infrastructure that allow this merchandise and this materials and these inputs and these communication cables to go faster and cheaper. So this initiative of IMEC and I2U2, combination of the energy of 4 countries, India, Israel, the United States, and the UAE, can bring a lot of them. Okay, so we've been doing some meetings about that. Now, as the war is winding down, that the situation in the region is becoming more settled, and there will be higher chances there. You'd be able to execute this program. Some of the thing visits are happening already. Communication cables are being put down as we speak. Okay. Yes. Okay. So the work has already begun. Some of it. We still have a lot of work. It's the majority of the work is a but the potential is there. There are many companies and NGOs that are engaging in writing studies because it's going to be a complementary core. It's not going to replace another core. Now, at the end of the day, there's nothing is going to replace the competitiveness of sending merchandise by ships and port. Okay, that's but sometimes when we have where we have to do things in a hurry, for example, we have fresh product, or you want to combine inputs from countries, that are on the core in the economic cycle, then you can have a complementary connectivity core. But in order for that to happen, we have to have the geopolitical.
Right, because I remember Iran was also part of that corridor somewhere.
Well, here's the issue. You have to differentiate. There are many ideas for many corridors. But at the end of the day, logic will prevail. In a place in which you have common neutral, which you have a secure environment, okay, then you can have the political structure and you can have the economic activity. Nothing is going to work. People were talking, for example, as a corridor going through Afghanistan. But, there's no, you cannot trust this people. You cannot trust the radical regime. You have to have stability. So what has been happening in the Gulf and in Israel is that following the Abraham Accords and the moving of Israel into the umbrella of CENTCOM, the American command of the region, we are having more and more coordination of plans to defending the skies of the region, to defending the maritime ways in the region. And when this goal is achieved, then the political and economic foundations will come. We cannot we cannot start building the building from the 50th floor.
She basically saying that Iran is
not enough. Well, look, but it's political. Yeah, of course not. Look, I hope that change comes to Iran. I think that the Iranian people are longing for it. They deserve it. If you had one population in the entire Middle East that actually is opposed to this radical, is the Iranian population, because they have been suffering from that for the last 50 years.
Yeah, I'd see several messages from the Prime Minister Netanyahu directly to the Iranian people.
One of the severest poverty in Iraq, for example, is water. Can you imagine that they had one of the biggest reserves of natural gas in the world, but they are freezing? No, they lack basic infrastructure, and this is only because the regime decided to, people shift the priorities of the people to this revolutionary Islamic radical ideology. So I hope that changes. We had historic things before, that we are our part of the world, including India. Has history. And in Israel, one of the things we remember, we had the Lot Memo, is we had land for many years. Memory became lost. So there is a famous story about the Cyrus Declaration. Cyrus was the ruler of Persia, and he emancipated, after they defeated the Babylonian Empire, they emancipated all the people in the region and allowed them to worship their gods. And even they couldn't do it, they helped them to finance the building of their shrine. Okay? So the history and the culture of the Persian people is different from that of this regime that is controlling their lives. And we have great hopes that we will be able to renew the great heritage, the tradition that we had in it.
All right. I just asking you one question, and so we'll end with that. The Abraham Accords. Now with Trump back in the White House, do you see it expecting?
I certainly hope so. We had to be patient, because they said if we manage to, put the right goods in the box, then we had higher chances. This can pass. There is no doubt. Look, decent people that had decent governments, they want to develop the economy, and they want to do something that is good for the future generations. You are seeing this change in the Gulf. See how countries are changing, how they are reforming, how they are trying to invest in radicalization of the societies. That is very important. And what they need, the region of West Asia, the region, needs is somebody that will say, you know what, we had your back. And I think that there is a chance that this is happening. So we have to do it one step at a time. But I'm very confident that it may achieve.
All right, lovely. Thanks. Good talking to you. I think now, as you celebrate 6th or the 7th month in India, we could be in Delhi. They want to be treated to the summers of Delhi now. What's been your best experience in India so far?
Move out from the war zone and just breathe a little. It's nature. We like nature. We are, since we were kids, we were hiking in Israel, and, as a young family, we took our kids to nature, and here, the landscapes in this country are amazing. So already in these 7 months that I'm here, I've already been to Goa, beautiful beaches. I went to Kerala. I went to Sod, yes, in Kochi, and I went to Uttarakhand, to Rice, to Jeepa and to Isori, and I went to Jaipur and Jodhpur. I was in
Which is the best that you like? You'll have to pick one. You want to say all that?
Well, the most impressive memory I have right now, because it's the last memory, is these trees with the red flowers. You have a Nutarkam, it's called a Garden Hills. It's a tree that actually has a rash of red flowers, all of red flower. I don't recall the name of the tree myself, but I've seen it. So actually, so beautiful. It's big, a big flower. Yeah, it's edible also. I know it has great quality, and I was amazed. In Israel we don't have this kind of case. We have the spring in Israel is very short, but we are semi-dry. At a semi-dry or even a desert, not either. So we enjoy the desert like 2 weeks of spring. So we see the flowers. We go in these 2 weeks to the desert. We see the flowers, and then that's it. That's it. Here
You can find the flowers throughout the area. That's like you look at lovely. 2 more flowers, more less war and more beauty, I guess. On that note, let's end this. Thank you so much to talk to us, and it's been a pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much.